The Mobian Domain is a territory that the Imperium of Man can ill afford to lose. Trillions of souls live within its borders, on worlds both ancient and new, and it is their faith and their toil upon which the Imperium has come to rely. Within the labyrinthine mines of Morax, armies of thralls strip the minerals and metals so desperately needed by the domain's unquenchable industry. Across Crucis, countless pilgrims flock to the holy sites of St. Messalina, their tithes swelling the coffers of the local ecclesiarchy. On Roseria, endless farms stretch to every horizon, their grox meat and algae sludge the only defense against mass famine on a dozen neighboring worlds. And over the sparkling oceans of Incron dock the vast warships of the Imperial Navy, a fleet base and anchorage vital to the entire sector's defense. There are no unimportant worlds within the Mobian Domain. The consequences of losing one would be disastrous. To lose them all is unthinkable. The Adeptus Administratum has worked tirelessly to ensure that the populace of the Mobian Domain persists in ignorance as to the dangers that surround them. Every citizen is at least vaguely aware that forces aligned to the ruinous powers and hostile Xenos races threaten their survival, but very few can speak to their specific nature. Collectively, the great enemy of the Domain is known simply as the Darktide. The conflict against the Darktide is similarly named the Fringe War, a deliberate choice meant to imply its distance from the core worlds of the Domain. Most assume the campaign is being exclusively waged in some faraway border systems, and perhaps at one time this was true. But while ceaseless broadcasts extol the heroic sacrifices of the Mobian regiments and the tremendous victories they have achieved, none dare mention that the front lines are far closer than is believed. The Darktide is no longer contained on the frontier, but in the very heart of the Mobian Domain itself. The battle to survive will not be won or lost in a faraway theater, but in a single world, a single city. The world is Atoma Prime. The city is Tertium. Like most Hive cities across the Imperium, Tertium is a massive arcology, a self-sufficient urban center within which many tens of billions will spend their entire lives. Even by Imperial standards, however, it is unusually widespread. Its foundation stretches for over 150 kilometers, while its tallest spires extend well beyond the planet's troposphere. Hive City Tertium is an artificial mountain, a bastion of civilization that rises from the inhospitable surrounding seas of drifting sands and dust. Generally, Tertium conforms to the typical layout of an Imperial Hive city and can be grouped into 5 broad sections. The first and largest is the Lower Hive, which forms the city's base. This is by far the most populous section, for it holds much of Tertium's residential housing and principal industries. The citizens that live here are almost universally members of the Hive's enormous workforce, either laboring within enormous industrial sectors, power plants, and manufactoria, or responsible for the endless maintenance required to keep such areas operational. Mobian iron forms the core of these industries. It is largely unique to Atoma Prime, and renowned for its valuable metallurgical qualities. While it has been used in a wide variety of applications, it is most famous for its inclusion in the armor of Mobian pattern Leman Russ demolisher tanks. These siege vehicles are produced throughout the Hive City, and are considered essential for the continued persecution of the Fringe War. As Mobian iron veins have been increasingly depleted, however, different methods of extracting the remaining traces have been developed. Enormous intakes have become a common sight across the Lower Hive, part of a crude method of extracting raw ore particulates from the dust storms that wreathe the entire world. These intakes wear out rapidly, and are constantly in the process of being replaced, but have helped to sustain the planet's overall production. The Upper Hive is home of what might be considered Tertium's middle class, within the Imperium's socio-economic hierarchy. Its residents are typically members of the Administratum, or other valued Imperial agencies, and include the various bureaucrats, managers, and officials necessary for the city to function with any degree of efficiency. merit is rarely enough on its own to secure a space within the upper hive. Instead, its comparatively spacious and well-appointed residences are often gifted to those in some way connected with the hive's cultural elite. The elite themselves are found exclusively within the spires, enormous structures that extend outwards to form the hive city's tallest points. The spires possess levels of extravagance unheard of anywhere else in the hive, with fresh food, advanced medical care, and luxury goods. Imperial nobility, merchant lords, industrial barons, church officials, and important off-world visitors form the core of its population. As the capital world of the entire Mobian Domain, the spires further host the primary or secondary residences of the planetary governor, the highest commanders of the Mobian regiments, and even Lord Margrave, sector lord of the entire Mobian Domain. Only immense wealth or power can secure a spot within the spires, well beyond what those in the lower levels can hope to amass in even 1,000 lifetimes. The outskirts form the perimeter of the hive's foundation, where the city collides with the surrounding wastelands. There is a constant battle to keep the outside elements of Atoma Prime at bay, and large sections of the outskirts have fallen into ruin or otherwise been swept up by the planet's prevalent dust storms. Industrial runoff and other pollutants have made this area toxic to human life, while even the barest amenities of the hive, like power and water, are intermittent, if not entirely absent. Mutants and other undesirables displaced from the hive itself often prey upon the outskirts for resources, with skirmishes across its sections especially common during the desperate months of the year. Yet, the outskirts are also the one place largely free from Imperial oversight, and have become a haven for smugglers, mercenaries, and all intrepid souls who desire a life in which they serve no masters but themselves. The last major section of Hive City Tertium is the Underhive. Reminiscent more of an animal warren than urban center, it is a collection of ruins and abandoned structures within which the poorest residents of the hive have taken refuge. Like the outskirts, the necessities of life are rare here, with every utility deliberately severed, so as to not be wasted. The Underhive is something of an emergent prison, a place where gangs, criminals, and the dregs of Tertium society might be left to die. There is no law within the Underhive, only the crude decrees of gang lords built upon the tenet of might makes right. A seething, violent anarchy rules the Underhive, one that has come to hate all those, rich and poor alike, within the other sections of the Hive City. Each section of the Hive City has been constructed from hundreds of thousands of urban blocks, specialized to fulfill a certain need. The most common are habitation and industrial blocks, though transit, religious, administrative, arbites, military, and countless other kinds of blocks have been scattered across Tertium. At one time, these would have been placed in such a way as to facilitate the easy and efficient movement of the Hive's workforce and the materials they produce. But millennia of urban decay have perverted the city's original design. Through the age of the Imperium, blocks added to Tertium have been placed haphazardly, with little consideration given to their effect on the greater hive. Smelter complexes are located on top of residential clusters, or missile propellant silos built alongside temperamental power matrices. Entire levels of the hive might have only a scattered few precinct fortresses, while others might be overburdened with twice as many as they require. The newest blocks are increasingly built wherever it is deemed easiest, and many are completely useless, too distant from the supporting blocks necessary for their operation. Additionally, the once distinct nature of blocks has been eroded by those that live or work within them. Living space is always in hopeless demand, and it is common for rudimentary, ramshackle residences to be constructed within every kind of block, particularly in those located too far from purpose-built residential zones. Likewise, abandoned structures within the hive will invariably be retrofitted at various levels of proficiency to include new homes, markets, and everything else required by its residents. This can be particularly dangerous, as those desperate enough to move to an abandoned area are not always able to accurately discern what has been abandoned. Entire communities have been incinerated after being constructed within smelters incorrectly believed to have been deactivated. The risk, however, is always outweighed by the thought of having a few extra square meters to live, and in this sense, every block within Tertium might be considered a habitation block. The extent of these modifications has even begun to deteriorate the divisions between the various sections, and it can be difficult to ascertain where the border between the upper and lower Hive truly is. Enclaves of luxury might be found within slums, while urban rot and those who dwell in such places exist even in the highest spires. Only the border to the Underhive remains conspicuous, guarded by elements of the Adeptus Arbites, or Militarum. Their presence here is not trivial. Rumors continue to swirl that a new power is growing within the lowest levels of Tertium, something far more dangerous, from which even the most violent gangs have been forced to flee. That battle tanks and anti-aircraft batteries have been mobilized within the Hive city itself would seem to support these rumors, and it is whispered that the Imperial Inquisition itself has taken interest in the area. Gunships and troop transports are now a common sight across the lower Hive, conducting sorties deep into the lower levels and depositing groups of Inquisition-aligned agents, condemned prisoners, if the rumors can be believed. That Hive City Tertium faces a new threat to its existence is now obvious beyond even the ability of Lord Margrave to suppress. But in what is likely its darkest hour, there are still signs of hope for the teeming billions that call the city home. For millennia, the Mobian regiments deployed to the Fringe War have held back the Darktide, and none have accrued more honors than the famed Mobian Six. They have been deployed back to Hive Tertium, a city many of its guardsmen call home, and their deployment within the city has revitalized its population. In their fighting on the battlefields of the Fringe, the Sixth have come to understand a great truth to the universe, and are now determined to use this knowledge for the betterment of all those in Tertium. The challenges they face are almost insurmountable: the rigid hierarchy of a corrupted system, the intolerance of a fanatical church, and ignorance in those who should be natural allies. But with truth also comes power, and the Mobian Sixth is said to have been blessed with the gifts of the divine. Wherever they advance, life flourishes in their wake, in such abundance and diversity never seen before on the planet. Laughter too might be heard amidst all the effervescent sounds of regeneration. If the Sixth is successful, if they can convince the Hive of the power of admonition, then Tertium might be reborn. It will stand atop Atoma Prime not as a pile of crumbling adamantium or rockcrete, but as a vibrant, living oasis, an incubator for every fertile seed and wondrous dream. A garden worthy of the Grandfather.
Thank you to Fat Shark for supporting our investigation into the depths of Hive City Tertium. If you'd like to help bash in the skulls of the Darktide with an entrenching tool, or find a noble death in the name of the Emperor, Warhammer 40,000 Darktide is now available on Steam, and you'll find a link in the description.